To create or grow is a part of change, cause and effect, but what it becomes is under the law of creation, not growth. The great eighth doctrine of growth, creation, is the doctrine of growing, birth, made, fashioned, by the use of genders, which as I said is derived from the Latin root meaning to beget, or begotten, to procreate, to generate, or regenerate, to produce. Simple, to grow in the womb of one of the sexes of gender. Namely the mother who controlled birth and what is born in her womb. She was first, regardless of what your Bible or Quran says. Women were before man. And the proof is in the mitochondrial DNA. She decides the gender, and without the gender and without her, we would all not be in the flesh. Flesh is not created by saying puff. It is grown as it goes through a 9-month in the womb, of 3 stages of growth. The idea of creating does not come into play until reason, opinion and decision are made. What that which is grown in the womb becomes after birth. When it begins to think for itself. What it likes, who it likes, where it will live and with whom. What it will become, a bum or success. These are personal decisions, which make you an individual. Then and only then is it safe to speak of creation or created. Now it unifies. That means something new happened, but even then, it's in the all, and the all is in all. Everyone breathes. In fact, everything breathes, inhales and exhales in and out. The key to life and existence is in the word intake. The great ninth Egyptian doctrine, the doctrine of breath, intake and out, embodies the law of life. Is not day and night a form of breathing, and is not this a law on how all things work? Even the birth and death of stars are universes. And without this doctrine, things can't be. Movement is merely a term for life and breath or breathing. A sign of existence. Without this form of movement there is no life. The doctrine of breath is cause and effect. All scientific thought, and ancient and even modern beliefs have to acknowledge this law. Breathing not only sustains life, but can cure or be the means by which illness get into the human body. The 3 demons, germs, bacteria and virus, were the devils of ancient Egypt. Sickness was a sign of demon possession. So breathing was a key to health or sickness, life or death. Yet, the all create beings that need to breathe, while in the body, but as the all return to all, the breathing stop. Movement stops, as you know it, from one point to the next. When all return to all, it will just be. No want, no will, no wish, no need, no me or you, him or her, yes or no. Just all in all. Both as one mental gender, male, female, and those caught in between the natural law of all things. If there be male and female, there must be she-male and he-female. That's the law in how things exist. If there is right and left, then there must be the middle. In all things this realization is the key to all happiness for self and others. Mind has no gender, only body. Soul has no gender, only body. Spirit has no gender, only body. Emotions works with the body. Students of psychology and religion who have followed the modern trend of thought along the lines of mental phenomena are struck by the persistence of the dual mind idea, which has manifested itself so strongly during the past years, evil devil minds, good God minds, and which has given rise to a number of plausible theories regarding the nature and constitution of these 2 minds, the objective and subjective minds, which they hold, existed in every individual. Other writers have attracted almost equal attention by the theories regarding the conscious and subconscious minds, the voluntary and involuntary minds, the active and passive minds. The theories of the various writers differ from each other, but there remains the underlying doctrine of the duality of mind. The student of the Egyptian teaching is tempted to smile when they read and hear of these many new theories regarding the duality of mind, each school adhering tenaciously to its own pet theories of a god and devil, both with power over the mind of human, which then in fact give you a third mind. The Trinity of minds, and each claiming to have discovered the truth. The student turns back the pages of occult history, and away back in the dim beginnings of occult teachings he finds references to the ancient Egyptian doctrine of the doctrine of gender on the mental plane, the manifestation of mental gender. And examining further, they find that the ancient teaching took cognizance of the phenomenon of the dual mind, and accounted for it by the teaching of mental gender. This idea of mental gender may be explained in a few words to students who are familiar with the modern teachings just alluded to. The masculine doctrine of mind corresponds to the so-called objective mind, conscious mind, voluntary mind, active mind, etc., and the feminine doctrine of mind corresponds to the so-called subjective mind, subconscious mind, involuntary mind, passive mind, etc. Of course, the Egyptian teachings do not agree with the many modern religious theories regarding the nature of the two phases of mind, nor does it agree with the many so-called facts claimed for the two respective aspects, some of the said theories and claims being very far-fetched and incapable of standing the test of experiment and demonstration. Do we need a God who is all-powerful, yet the devil has some of his power? When things go good it's God, when things go bad for us it's the devil. We, Egyptians, don't accept that as true or a reality. We point to the phases of agreement merely for the purpose of helping the student to assimilate his previously acquired knowledge with the teachings of the Egyptian masters, the duality of mind. If you had taken the time and trouble to decipher a little of the mystic jargon of the Egyptian teaching, you might have received much right knowledge upon the subject of the dual mind or even the tri-mind, but then, perhaps, your most interesting work, the Bible, might not have been written. Let us now consider the Egyptian teachings regarding the mental gender. The Egyptian teachers impart their instruction regarding this subject by bidding their students examine the report of their consciousness regarding their self. The students are bidden to turn their attention inward upon the self dwelling within each. Each student is led to see that their consciousness gives them first a report of the existence of themselves. The report is I am, step 1, then me, myself and I. There is our real tri-mind in one being, you. While at first there seems to have been only an I, existing. A more careful and closer examination reveals the fact that there exists an I and a me. The me is the responding you is in, who me? Not me. These mental twins differ in their characteristics and nature, and an examination of their nature and the phenomena arising from the same will throw much right knowledge upon many of the problems of mental influence. Then you have myself and in confirmed. I did it myself, which lead to, who me? Yes. I did it myself. And the third doctrine is I, as in I did it, or I am that I am, or even I am who I am. Let us begin with a consideration of the me, again, which is usually mistaken for the I by the student, until he presses the inquiry a little further back into the recesses of consciousness. A mortal thinks of themselves, in its aspect of me, as being composed of certain feelings, tastes, likes, dislikes, habits, peculiar ties, characteristics, etc., all of which go to make up their personality, or the self known to themselves and others. They know that these emotions and feelings change, are born and die away, are subject to the doctrine of rhythm, and the doctrine of polarity, which take him from one extreme of feeling to another. They also think of the me as being certain knowledge gathered together in their mind, and thus forming a part of themselves. This is the me of a mortal. But we have proceeded too hastily. The me of many humans may be said to consist largely of their consciousness of the body and their physical appetites, etc. Their consciousness being largely bound up with their bodily nature, they practically live there. Some humans even go so far as to regard their personal apparel as a part of their me, and actually seem to consider it a part of themselves. A writer has humorously said that humans consist of three parts: soul, body and clothes. These clothes-conscious people would lose their personality if divested of their clothing by savages upon the occasion of a shipwreck. But even many who are not so closely bound up with the idea of personal raiment stick closely to the consciousness of their bodies being their me and not their I. They cannot conceive a self independent of the body. Their mind seems to them to be practically a something belonging to their body, which in many cases it is indeed. But as human rises in the scale of consciousness, they are able to disentangle their me from their idea of body, and is able to think of their body as belonging to the mental part of them called I. But even then, they are very apt to identify the me entirely with the mental states, feelings, etc., which they feel to exist within them. They are very apt to consider these internal states as identical with themselves, instead of there being simply things as myself to yourself to herself onto themselves, things not a thing, produced by some part of their mentality, and existing within them, of them, and in them, but still not themselves. They see that they may change these internal states of feelings by an effort of will, and that they may produce a feeling or state of an exactly opposite nature, in the same way, and yet the same me exists. And so after a while they are able to set aside these various mental states, emotions, feelings, habits, qualities, characteristics, and other personal mental belongings. They are able to set them aside in the not me, not by myself, I did not do that collection of curiosities and encumbrances, as well as valuable possessions. This requires much mental concentration and power of mental analysis on the part of the student. But still the task is possible for the advanced student, and even those not so far advanced are able to see, in the imagination, how the process may be performed. Who are you? I am who I am. And just who is that? Me who? Myself, that's who I am. After this laying aside process has been performed, the student will find themselves in conscious possession of a naive self, which may be considered in its I and me dual aspects. The me will be felt to be a something mental in which thoughts, ideas, emotions, feelings, and other mental states may be produced. It may be considered as the mental womb, as the ancients styled it, capable of generating mental offspring. It reports to the consciousness as a me with latent powers of creation and generation of mental progeny of all sorts and kinds. Its powers of creative energy are felt to be enormous. But still it seems to be conscious that it must receive some form of energy from either its I companion, or else from some other I, ere it is able to bring into being its mental creations. This consciousness brings with it a realization of an enormous capacity for mental work and creative ability. But the student soon finds that this is not all that they find within their inner consciousness. They find that there exists a mental something which is able to will that the me, act along certain creative lines, and which is also able to stand aside and witness the mental creation. This part of themselves they are taught to call as Nook, I. They are able to rest in its consciousness of an ability to generate and actively create, in the sense of the gradual process attendant upon mental operations, but rather a sense and consciousness of an ability to project an energy from the I to the me to the myself, a process of willing that the mental creation begin and proceed. They also find that the Nook, I is able to stand aside and witness the operations of the me and Nazifi, myself's, creation and generation. There is this dual and triad aspects in the mind of every person. The I represents the God doctrine of mental gender, the me represents the student doctrine, and the myself represents the servant. The I represents the aspect of being, the me the aspect of becoming, and myself the aspect of cooperation. You will notice that the doctrine of correspondence operates on this plane just as it does upon the great plane upon which the creation of universes is performed. The three are similar in kind, although vastly different in degree. As above, so below, as below, so above, and that which is in between. These aspects of mind, the God and student doctrines, the I and the me, and the myself, considered in connection with the well-known mental and psychic phenomena, give the master key to these dimly known regions of mental operation and manifestation. The doctrine of mental gender gives the truth underlying the whole field of the phenomena of mental influence, etc. The tendency of the student doctrine is always in the direction of receiving impressions, while the tendency of the God doctrine is always in the direction of giving out, or expressing, and in the direction of myself is always serving. The student doctrine has a much more varied field of operation than has the God doctrine. The student doctrine conducts the work of generating new thoughts, concepts, and ideas, including the work of the imagination. The God doctrine contents itself with the work of the will, and it is in its varied phases. And yet without the active aid of the will of the God doctrine, the student doctrine and the servant doctrine is apt to rest content with generating mental images which are the result of impressions received from outside, instead of producing original mental creations. Persons who can give continued attention and thought to a subject actively employ both of the mental doctrine, the student in the work of active mental generation, and the God will in stimulating and energizing the creative portion and the servant utilizing the mind. The majority of persons really employ the God doctrine but little, are content to live according to the thoughts and ideas instilled into the me or myself from the I of other minds. But it is not our purpose to dwell upon this phase of the subject, which may be studied from any good textbook upon psychology, with the key that we have given you regarding mental gender. The student of psychic phenomena is aware of the wonderful phenomena classified under the head of telepathy, thought transference, mental influence, suggestion, hypnotism, etc. The four higher senses. 1. Telepathy, 2. Intuition, 3. Psychometry, and 4. Clairvoyance. Many have sought for an explanation of these varied phases of phenomena under the theories of the various dual mind teachers. And in a measure, they are right, for there is clearly a manifestation of two distinct phases of mental activity. But if such students will consider these triad minds and the knowledge of the Egyptian teachings regarding vibrations and mental gender, they will see that the long sought for key is at hand. In the phenomena of telepathy, it is seen how the vibratory energy of the God doctrine is projected toward the student doctrine of another person, and the latter takes the seed thought and allows it to develop into maturity. In the same way suggestion and hypnotism operates. The God doctrine of the person giving the suggestions directs a stream of vibratory energy or willpower toward the student doctrine of the other person, and the latter accepting it makes it its own and acts and thinks accordingly. An idea thus lodged in the mind of another person grows and develops, and in time is regarded as the rightful mental offspring of the individual, whereas it is in reality like the cuckoo egg placed in the sparrow's nest, where it destroys the rightful offspring and makes itself at home. The normal method is for the God and student doctrine in a person's mind to coordinate and act harmoniously in conjunction with each other. But, unfortunately, the God doctrine in the average person is too lazy to act, the display of willpower is too slight, and the consequence is that such persons are tied almost entirely by the minds and wills of other persons, whom they allow to do their thinking and willing for them. How few original thoughts or original actions are performed by the average person? Which is what makes them a created thing. Are not the majority of persons mere shadows and echoes of others having stronger wills or minds than themselves? The trouble is that the average person dwells almost altogether in their me consciousness, and does not realize that they have such a thing as an I. They are polarized in their student doctrine of mind, and the God doctrine, in which is lodged the will, is allowed to remain inactive and not employed. The strong men and women of the world invariably manifest the God doctrine of will, and their strength depends materially upon this fact. Instead of living upon the impressions made upon their minds by others, they dominate their own minds by their will, obtaining the kind of mental images desired, and moreover dominate the minds of others likewise, in the same manner. Look at the strong people, how they manage to implant their seed thoughts in the minds of the masses of the people, thus causing the latter to think thoughts in accordance with the desires and wills of the strong individuals. This is why the masses of people are such sheep-like creatures, never originating an idea of their own, nor using their own powers of mental activity. The manifestation of mental gender may be noticed all around us in everyday life. The magnetic persons are those who are able to use the God doctrine in the way of impressing their ideas upon others. The actor who makes people weep or cry as they will, is employing this doctrine. And so is the successful orator, statesman, teacher, writer or other people who are before the public attention. The peculiar influence exerted by some people over others is due to the manifestation of mental gender, along the vibratorial lines above indicated. In this doctrine is the secret of personal magnetism, personal influence, fascination, etc., as well as the phenomena generally grouped under the name of hypnotism. The student who has familiarized themselves with the phenomena generally spoken of as psychic will have discovered the important part played in the said phenomena by that force which science has styled suggestion, by which term is meant the process or method whereby an idea is transferred to, or impressed upon the mind of another, causing the second mind to act in accordance therewith. A correct understanding of suggestion is necessary in order to intelligently comprehend the varied psychical phenomena which suggestion underlies. But, still more is a knowledge of vibration and mental gender necessary for the student of suggestion. For the whole doctrine of suggestion depends upon the doctrine of mental gender and vibration. It is customary for the writers and teachers of suggestion to explain that it is the objective or voluntary mind which make the mental impression, or suggestion, upon the subjective or involuntary mind. But they do not describe the process or give us any analogy in nature whereby we may more readily comprehend the idea. But if you will think of the matter in the light of the Egyptian teachings, you will be able to see that the energizing of the student doctrine by the vibratory energy of the God doctrine is in accordance to the universal laws of nature, and that the natural world affords countless analogies whereby the doctrine may be overstood. In fact, the Egyptian teachings show that the very creation of the universe follows the same law, and that in all creative manifestations, upon the planes of the spiritual, the mental, and the physical, there is always in operation this doctrine of gender, this manifestation of the God in the student doctrines. As above, so below, as below, so above. And more than this, when the doctrine of mental gender is once grasped and overstood, the varied phenomena of psychology at once becomes capable of intelligent classification and study, instead of being very much in the blinding light of ignorance. The doctrine words out in practice, because it is based upon the immutable universal laws of life. The student may acquaint themselves with these matters, and by using the knowledge of mental gender they will be able to bring order out of the chaos of conflicting knowledge and teachings, and may, moreover, readily make themselves a master of the subject if they be so inclined. The purpose of this work is not to give an extended account of psychic phenomena, but rather to give to the student a master key whereby they may unlock the many doors leading into the parts of the pyramids of right knowledge which they may wish to explore in the ancient Egyptian order. I feel that in this consideration of the teachings of Tahuti Thoth, one may find an explanation, which will serve to clear away many perplexing difficulties, a key that will unlock many doors. What is the use of going into detail regarding all of the many features of psychic phenomena and mental science, provided we place in the hands of the student the means whereby many acquaint themselves fully regarding any phase of the subject which may interest them? With the aid of the ancient Egyptian order one may go through any occult library anew, the old blinding light from each religion. That is the purpose of this book, to set the record of Tahuti straight as it has been tampered with by the Hyksos Canaanites when in Egypt. I do not come expounding a new philosophy, but rather furnishing the outlines of a great world-old teaching, which will make clear the teachings of others, which will serve as a great reconciler of differing theories, and opposing doctrines. The possession of right knowledge, unless accompanied by a manifestation and expression in action, as right wisdom and right understanding, is like the hoarding of precious metals, a vain and foolish thing. Right knowledge, like wealth, is intended for use. The law of use is universal, and he or she who violates it suffers by reason of their conflict with natural forces. The Egyptian teachings, while always having been kept securely locked up in the minds of the fortunate possessors thereof, who knew to keep the best, kept secrets, kept sacred, for reasons which we have already stated, were never intended to be merely stored away and secreted, but used and applied. The law of use is dwelt upon in the teachings, as you may see by reference to the above quotation from the Tahuti teachings, which states it forcibly. Right knowledge without use and expression is a vain thing, bringing no good to its possessor, or to the new Wapian. Beware of mental miserliness, and express into action that which you have learned. Study the axioms and aphorisms, but practice them also. We give below some of the more important Egyptian axioms, from the Egyptian teachings, with a few comments added to each. Make these your own, and practice and use them, for they are not really your own until you have used them. To change your mood or mental state, change your vibration. One may change their mental vibrations by an effort of will, in the direction of deliberately fixing the attention upon a more desirable state. Will directs the attention, and attention changes the vibration. Cultivate the art of attention, by means of the will, and you have solved the secret of the mastery of moods and mental states. To destroy an undesirable rate of mental vibration, put into operation the doctrine of polarity and concentrate upon the opposite pole to which you desire to suppress, keeping in mind they have the same root. Kill out the undesirable by changing its polarity. This is one of the most important of the Egyptian formulas. It is based upon true scientific doctrines. I have shown you that a mental state and its opposite were merely the two poles of one thing, and that by mental transmutation the polarity might be reversed. This doctrine is known to modern psychologists, who apply it to the breaking up of undesirable habits by bidding their students concentrate upon the opposite quality. If you are possessed of fear, do not waste time trying to kill out fear, but instead cultivate the quality of courage, and the fear will disappear. Some writers have expressed this idea most forcibly by using the illustration of the bright light. You do not have to block out or cover up the brightness, but by merely switching of the light switch and letting your eye adjust to the pure darkness, the evil blinding light has disappeared. To kill out a negative quality, concentrate upon the positive pole of that same quality, and the vibrations will gradually change from negative to positive, until finally you will become polarized on the positive pole instead of the negative. The reverse is also true, as many have found out to their sorrow, when they have allowed themselves to vibrate too constantly on the negative pole of things. By changing your polarity you may master your moods, change your mental states, remake your disposition, and build up character. Much of the mental mastery of the advanced Egyptians is due to this application of polarity, which is one of the important aspects of mental transmutation. Mind, as well as metals and elements, may be transmuted from state to state, degree to degree, condition to condition, pole to pole, vibration to vibration. The mastery of polarization is the mastery of the fundamental doctrine of mental transmutation or mental alchemy, for unless one acquires the art of changing his or her own polarity, they will be unable to affect their environment. An understanding of this doctrine will enable one to change their own polarity, as well as that of others, if they will but devote the time, care, study and practice necessary to master the art. The doctrine is true, but the results obtained depend upon the persistent patience and practice of the student. Rhythm may be neutralized by an application of the art of polarization. As I have explained in previous chapters, the Egyptians hold that the doctrine of rhythm manifests on the mental plane as well as on the physical plane, and that the bewildering succession of moods, feelings, emotions, and other mental states, are due to the backward and forward swing of the mental pendulum, which carries us from one extreme feeling to the other. The Egyptians also teach that the law of neutralization enables one, to a great extent, to overcome the operation of rhythm in consciousness. As we have explained, there is a higher plane of consciousness, as well as the ordinary lower plane, and the master by rising mentally to the higher plane causes the swing of the mental pendulum to manifest on the lower plane, and they, dwelling on their higher plane, escapes the consciousness of the swing backward. This is effected by polarizing on the higher self, and thus raising the mental vibrations of the ego above those of the ordinary plane of consciousness. It is akin to pass beneath you. The advanced Egyptians polarizes themselves at the positive pole of their being, the I am pole rather than the pole of personality, and by refusing and denying the operation of rhythm, raises themselves above its plane of consciousness, and standing firm in their statement of being they allow the pendulum to swing back on the lower plane without changing their polarity. This is accomplished by all individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery, whether they overstand the law or not. Such persons simply refuse to allow themselves to be swung back by the pendulum of mood and emotion, and by steadfastly affirming the superiority, they remain polarized on the positive pole. The master, of course, attains a far greater degree of proficiency, because they overstand the law which they are overcoming by a higher law, and by the use of their will they attain a degree of poise and mental steadfastness almost impossible of knowledge on the part of those who allow themselves to be swung backward and forward by the mental pendulum of moods and feelings. Remember, always, however, that you do not really destroy the doctrine of rhythm, for that is indestructible. You simply overcome one law by counterbalancing it with another, and thus maintain an equilibrium. The laws of balance and counterbalance are in operation on the mental as well as on the physical planes, and an overstanding of these laws enables one to seem to overthrow laws, whereas they are merely exerting a counterbalance. Nothing escapes the doctrine of cause and effect, but there are many planes of causation, and one may use the laws of the higher to overcome the laws of the lower. By an overstanding of the practice of polarization, the Egyptians rise to a higher plane of causation and thus counterbalance the laws of the lower planes of causation. By rising above the plane of ordinary causes they become themselves, in a degree, causes instead of being merely caused. By being able to master their own moods and feelings, and by being able to neutralize rhythm, as we have already explained, they are able to escape a great part of the operations of cause and effect on the ordinary plane. The masses of people are carried along, obedient to their environment, the wills and desires of others stronger than themselves, the effects of inherited tendencies, the suggestions of those about them, and other outward causes, which tend to move them about on the chessboard of life like mere pawns. By rising above these influencing causes, the advanced Egyptians seek a higher plane of mental action, and by dominating their moods, emotions, impulses and feelings, they create for themselves new characters, qualities and powers, by which they overcome their ordinary environment, and thus become practically players instead of mere pawns. Such people help to play the game of life overstandingly, instead of being moved about this way and that way by stronger influences, powers and wills. They use the doctrine of cause and effect, instead of being used by it. Of course, even the highest are subject to the doctrine as it manifests on the higher planes, but on the lower planes of activity, they are masters instead of slaves. As Tahuti says, the wise ones serve on the higher, but rule on the lower. They obey the laws coming from above them, but on their own plane, and those below them, they rule and give orders. And, yet, in so doing, they form a part of the doctrine, instead of opposing it. The wise person falls in with the law, and by overstanding its movements they operate it instead of being its blind slave. Just as does the skilled swimmer turn this way and that way, going and coming as they will, instead of being as the log which is carried here and there, so is the wise human being as compared to the ordinary mortal, and yet both swimmer and log, wise mortal and fool, are subject to law. He who overstands this will be on the road to mastery. In conclusion, let us again call your attention to the Egyptian axiom. True Egyptian transmutation is a mental art. In the above axiom, the Egyptians teach that the great work of influencing one's environment is accomplished by mental power. The universe being wholly mental, it follows that it may be ruled only by mentality. And in this truth is to be found an explanation of all the phenomena and manifestations of the various mental powers, which are attracting so much attention and study in these earlier years of the 21st century. Back of and over the teachings of the various cults and schools, remains ever constant the doctrine of the mental substance of the universe. If the universe be mental in its substantial nature, then it follows that mental transmutation must change the conditions and phenomena of the universe. If the universe is mental, then mind must be the highest power affecting its phenomena. If this be overstood, then all the so-called miracles and wonder workings are seen plainly for what they are. The all is mind, the universe is mental. Is it not only mental? Then what is it? And that is the big question with a small answer. It's not merely mental, it's all.